You may have a few questions, like why am I here?
Like, what is the Thriving Man podcast?
Why is the Thriving Man podcast? We're going to answer all of those questions and more. In fact, we're going to discuss one of the biggest barriers to growth and success in your personal life. All that and more today on the show.
This is the Thriving Man Podcast with David and Reese Maxwell. These weekly shows are designed to help you remove the confusion from your life and make real progress with your growth. No matter where you are or where you're going, we're here to help you live a life you can be proud of. So welcome to the Thriving Man Podcast.
Welcome to the Thriving Man Podcast, where our goal is to help you live a life that you can be proud of. I'm Reese.
And I'm David.
And we're here to be able to equip you with knowledge and with practical tools to have a successful life. Let's go ahead and jump right into our first show.
Yeah.
Before we do that, I think it would be good to give a little bit of background as to how we got here. First of all, can you explain how this was originally named a different podcast and what you did with that?
Yeah, most of you are here because you've listened to the former podcast, the Confident Man Podcast. And the goal of that was to empower men to really do the same thing. But the podcast was just me by myself, and very much enjoyed doing it, continued doing it. And about a year and a half ago, my son Reese and I did a podcast called Hey Dad.
Yeah, a separate podcast.
Yeah, we did it as a separate podcast just for fun. We thought it'd be a good thing to do, and we really enjoyed it. We did it for over a year. And from that, we started thinking, maybe we should do this together for men, because we have the same passion to see men grow and be better and live that life they can be proud of.
Yeah.
So we started talking about it.
Yeah.
And then we started really moving into it and thought, well, let's do it. Let's do it together. And that's kind of how this came about.
Yeah, we found that as we were working together, we both had ideas that were better than what we made originally by ourselves.
Yeah.
So like we would dialogue, and as we dialogued, we found a better version of what one of us had thought of on our own.
Yeah.
So we thought, man, if we can do that, well, why don't we just kind of put our heads together and make an even better podcast, kind of streamlined.
Yeah, we wanted to let the collaboration effort come together, and we really felt like it helped both of us. Because when you're working in a vacuum by yourself, you may think it's a good idea, and you're like, "Is this good?" And it may or may not be. Some ideas are good. Some ideas, they need some work. So, when you have that other voice, it's kind of nice.
Yeah, it's true. And in fact, this is actually more than a podcast. We are going to be doing multiple aspects of what the Thriving Man brand is. This is the Thriving Man podcast itself. We already kind of explained that. But we're also going to be creating digital courses, which are going to become available in September to kind of help you in various areas of foundational success. And then also we're doing individualized coaching. So that's a one-on-one coaching that is more specific to you and to your circumstances. And so all of that we're collaborating on. We're creating it together in order to be able to help men in as many ways as possible.
Yeah. And that's what we really, it's taking what the Confident Man was about building confident men, but it's finding a better way to kind of make that happen through Thriving Men, because we want to see men really thrive. And it doesn't have just to do with confidence. It has to do with how you live life in a lot of different areas. And we're going to be talking about that.
Yeah.
And it's something we believe in. And so we want to create resources, have this podcast as a resource to really just help men all over the world live better.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah. So we didn't change it from Confident Man to Thriving Man just so it would sound different.
Yeah.
The whole thing is we want guys to go from survivor mode to really thriving. We want guys to be able to feel like they're living life to the fullest.
Yeah.
I mean, our tagline is to help you live a life that you can be proud of.
Yeah.
A lot of people try to escape from their lives. A lot of people feel unfulfilled. And our goal is to help you go from feeling unfulfilled to fulfilled.
Yeah. And we kind of define that as when a man lays his head on the pillow at night, he can look at his life and feel like, I'm doing well. Am I perfect? No. Am I doing everything right? No.
No.
But I'm giving my full effort. I'm growing, I'm changing, I'm getting better. And I think that's a thing that when a man does that, he just knows. It's not something, a checkbook doesn't tell him that.
Yeah.
An accolade from work doesn't tell him that. It's just something every man knows. That's why you see men who are very successful financially, but aren't doing well in other areas of their life, and they're not happy.
Yeah.
They're not proud of their life.
Yeah. And we want you to not end up like those people.
Yeah.
We want you to be able to be satisfied in every area of your life. In fact, this podcast is connected to our website, thrivingman.com. You can go to thrivingman.com/coaching if you want to look at the various things we offer.
Yeah.
We've got a free PDF that's out there right now. And
We
then
do.
we're going to be making those digital courses that will be released soon. And then the one-on-one coaching. It's all with the same goal in mind.
Yeah.
So that's what this podcast is about. That's what we're about. And that's what we're going to be moving forward to doing over the next however long this is.
Yeah. Yeah. Hopefully a long time.
Yeah, I agree. So over the next few weeks, we are going to start with facing some of the, I guess we would call it the reality of issues that men have today. We're talking about the top 3 biggest barriers between you and the successful life that you want, the life that you can be proud of. And we want to help you navigate those. But first, we got to take an honest look at them.
Yeah.
And the first one is confusion. Confusion is one of the number 1 barriers between you and the life you want. Dad, could you kind of explain confusion a little bit? What does that look like practically?
Yeah. For a lot of men today, they never had anyone show them what to do. So they're living life and they're just like, am I doing this right? Is this the right way to do life? I talk to a lot of men who are just struggling. How do I, take care of my job and have a good marriage and be a good father and mow the grass and do whatever.
Right.
What does that look like? And so a lot of men just aren't sure. And so they're confused because they're hearing this message from one person. They hear this message from another person. And so for a lot of men today, they kind of feel like they're in a tug of war from all these messagings. And then they look in their own life and think, I don't know. Because a lot of men today just don't know. They don't know what's happening. So many men today grew up with no dad, and then they're becoming a dad. And so what those guys had was really just a lack of instruction.
Yeah.
No one showed them.
Yeah.
So they had to watch TV, they had to, read or do whatever. And a lot of guys were just busy and they never did that. So then all of a sudden they're married, they have a child, and they're like, oh, what do I do now? And they're just not sure.
Yeah. And I think you have a point there. One of the biggest things that has led to the general confusion that most of us men have is a lack of instruction.
Yeah.
It's a lack of a father for a lot of guys. It's a lack of a mentor.
Yeah.
And I'm curious, you've done life. You've not only had the growing up process without as much of a model as you wish you could have, but you've also, I know from personal experience, you had to be a father to me.
Yeah.
And you had to learn about that. So I'm wondering from your perspective, what makes a mentor, a example, a person of instruction so vitally important to somebody as a man succeeding?
Yeah, I think something that all men understand is coaches. When you play a sport, you have a coach. And that's kind of the dad role in life. Men are designed to be coaches to the next generation.
Right.
And with so many men growing up without that coach, they're not sure, am I doing it right? Am I doing? So they just don't know. And I think that's where a lot of guys are today. They just don't know. So they have to go find that. And a lot of guys don't know how to do that. And you really can't have a coach unless you have someone who wants them.
Yeah.
Like in professional, they pay a coach to coach players. So there's a way to do it. In our life, we have to go find those coaches.
Right.
And
especially if they're not built into our life.
Yeah.
Like if you have a dad, that's a built-in coach.
Yeah. Yeah. And sometimes we have a built-in dad, but he didn't give us a good example.
True.
True. A lot of you probably had a dad who you're like, I don't want to be him. And that's a reality for a lot of men today.
Yeah.
So I think it really starts with us saying, okay, if I want to learn what's out there, because I know for me, My parents divorced when I was young, and I didn't have a dad, especially through my teen years. And it was hard because he lived 2 states away. We didn't connect like we do today on FaceTime and all that.
Yeah, I didn't have all that technology.
Yeah, there was a rotary phone, and that
Yeah.
was it. So, we talked a couple of weeks. I'd see him a couple of times a year. It was tough. And so when you were born, I didn't know.
Mhm.
And that kind of woke me up to a lot of stuff. So I started just seeking out, what can I read? What seminars can I go to? What conferences can I go to? And just started kind of voraciously taking in all I could so I could be a man, because I realized I don't know what I'm doing.
Yeah. I like the coach analogy because when we don't have instruction,
Mm-hmm.
it's almost like life becomes a game without any rules.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like, how can you play a sport if you don't know how to score?
Yeah.
How can
it's true.
you play, let's say, football if you don't know how the system of plays even works?
Yeah.
If you can't tell defense from offense, if you're just standing there on the field
Yeah.
and everybody's lining up, getting ready for the next play, and no one's told you anything,
Yeah.
you're not going to be able to go to the pros. That's for sure.
Well, do you remember what was the game? It was the card game. Somebody taught
Mao.
us. Mao. It's this game where nobody explains the rules.
Yep.
You have to figure them out as you play
By getting penalized.
by getting penalized, and you want to punch people in the face during the game.
It's annoying.
It's very annoying. After a while, when you start to learn the rules, you enjoy
You
it.
get in the
'cause
snob mode.
Yeah,
You're like,
yeah. Yeah, I'm better than all of you people.
Draw a card, buddy.
But a lot of people, that's their life. They're playing Mao with life.
Mhm.
I don't know the rules. Let me try this. Oh, that's wrong. Oh,
Mhm.
people tell me this is wrong. People tell, and I just don't know. So
Yeah.
I think you're right. It's a lot of guys are living life trying to be a good man, a good husband, a good father, but they're not sure. What does it look
Yeah.
like? How do I do it?
And I'd even say more than that. Some guys are trying and getting penalized, like in that game.
Yeah.
But some guys are like, if I'm just going to get penalized for trying, I might as well not try.
That's a good point. Yeah.
So I think we've got a lot of guys who don't try
Yeah.
or just try to escape.
Yeah.
I personally think that's one of the reasons that like video games
Mhm.
are so huge. I enjoy video games myself,
Yeah.
but some people get sucked into that world so much
Yeah.
because it's got very clearly defined rules.
It does. That's
This
true.
is your goal. That's
Mhm.
what you're trying to do. Maybe that should be a different podcast episode in the future. But I think guys are craving some kind of structure, like show me how to do this.
Yeah.
What does a win look like?
Yeah.
But life is so complicated. And if you don't have any instructions, it just
Yeah.
results in this confusion. You're kind of in this haze.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of guys are like, well, forget it.
Well, and it feels like life's not fair. And life's not fair in a lot of ways, but there are at least, what are the ground rules?
Mm-hmm.
And I think everybody likes that. What are the rules? What's a good thing? What's bad? And when no one tells you that, when you
Mhm.
lack those instructions,
Mm-hmm.
you're at a severe disadvantage.
Yeah.
And I think that's how a lot of men feel. So I think
Yeah.
you're right. I think a lot of men check out. I'm just going to focus on work. I'm going to focus on, making a bunch of money, or I'm just going to run away and escape and just live in a virtual world in
Yeah.
one way or another.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of men have done that. And a lot of men, when they allow a marriage to break up and things like that, because I think a lot of men feel like I'm just not enough.
Mm.
And so because they lack the instructions, they self-blame, and that kind of makes them even more so pull back from the emotional relationships they need, the relationships with their children.
Yeah.
And then they feel more like a failure, and it kind of, perpetuates itself on and on.
Yeah. And I get the tendency.
Mhm.
Like I've done that before. I've had plenty of times where I've seen something that I needed to do that was difficult. And so I just ignored it.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, we
And
all do that.
Everyone does it.
Yeah.
But the danger is if you do it with your whole life,
Mm-hmm.
you're never going to be able to live.
Well, and so
that
many
would be
men,
tragic.
yeah, so many men do it with their relationships.
Mm.
And that's why you see men going from relationship to relationship to relationship, because they don't know how to dig into their emotions. So they don't know how to go deep with somebody.
Yeah.
So they always stay surface level. And then when it starts to go a little too deep, it gets uncomfortable, they move on to the next one.
Yeah. And all of that kind of plays back into the confusion element.
Yeah.
So there's this giant barrier,
Yeah.
confusion, which one comes from a lack of instruction.
Yeah.
But there's a second aspect that I think should discuss, which is, I guess you should say, the unrealistic expectation of society on men, or maybe you could say it as the unhealthy expectations of society on men.
Yeah. Yeah.
The messages that we oftentimes get from our culture, I would not call affirming.
Yeah. Well, especially as men. I mean, gosh, the last 50 years, we've seen this rise of this toxic masculinity where, men are evil, men are bad. The man is trying to put you down. No one says, the woman's trying to put me down. It's always the man's trying to put me down. And there are guys who fit that role.
Yeah, there's some out there like that.
There's truth in that, but it's not the majority of men.
Mm-hmm.
And what we have to do a lot of times as men is we have to purposely fight that messaging because it's so strong in our society that especially a lot of younger men have just accepted that.
Yeah.
Well, I don't want to be toxic. And so they become passive.
I don't want to be the bad guy.
Yeah. And so a lot of men don't know how to lead, which means they don't know how to lead themselves.
Mm-hmm.
They don't know how to lead their family. They don't know how to lead their community, their society, in any place they're at. And they've accepted that messaging.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I don't want people to think I'm a bad guy.
Right.
And so that also confuses men.
Yeah.
Because, well, I feel like that's wrong. I should say something, but I don't want people to think I'm toxic.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to say anything.
Yeah.
When we need men to step up, we need men to say, no, that's wrong. We're not doing that. That's the role of men. But a lot of men don't know how to do that because they bought into this messaging. They've been taught their whole life. In fact, today it's almost like, we talk about girl boss power and, women are great leaders in a lot of ways. But that doesn't mean men can't be leaders. But it's almost like our society has shifted it.
Yeah.
Where even in movies and all over, it's always the woman who's the leading and the guy is just kind of sitting to the side or is the comic relief.
Yeah.
Which frustrates me in a lot of comedy shows. The dad is just a bumbling idiot.
Yeah. A lot of times.
He's the butt of every joke. And it's frustrating, I think, for men to see that and feel like that's all they are.
Right. Yeah. To have this idea like subconsciously thrown at you constantly that you're kind of an idiot.
Yeah.
And if you succeed, that means other people will fail.
Yeah.
Which is not the case. The truth is, as we will discuss in the future, when a man is thriving, when a man's really living well, and living as Jesus did, everything around him gets better.
Yeah.
Because guys can't be all about themselves. We do not do well in that kind of environment.
Yeah.
But if we can thrive for the sake of others, man, it's going to benefit family, spouse, friends, community. So if we can work past this confusion, these negative messages, these false messages, it's not only going to benefit us, it's going to benefit the people around us.
Yeah. And I think that's where a lot of men, they're kind of trying to figure out what's my place in society. And when you have a man who really isn't sure who he is, it's hard for him to find a place because he keeps searching. Okay, am I this? Am I that? Society tells men they're stupid.
Right.
So we're seeing less and less men go to college, do things like that.
Right.
It's telling, men are just bags of hormones. So they're saying men can't control themselves. So what are we seeing today? A lot of guys just, okay, well, I'm just going to be that.
Yeah.
And, we're seeing men who are just getting into these relationships in and out. It's not even a relationship. It's just a straight hookup. And our society is saying, yeah. But it's funny because our society says hookup is good, but then it says men are toxic. And that's confusing to a guy. It's like, well, you tell me to be a guy who's like this. I'm just a bag of hormones. So I'm going to be a bag of hormones. And then, they get on Tinder, there's girls there and all this. And then they're told they're toxic. And it's like, well, wait, which one is it? I'm just being who you want me to be, who you say I am.
Yeah. Society's like, oh, you're successful if you can sleep with a lot of women.
Yep.
But then the kind of guy that just wants to sleep with a lot of women is looked down on.
Yeah.
And so it's like, wait, is that a win or not?
I know.
So if you listen to society, you're just going to be confused.
And I think that's it. I think for a lot of guys, they don't know where to get their messaging from. So they don't have a mentor. They don't have people speaking into them. So they're watching movies. They're, listening to music.
Which
and
are
think,
terrible examples.
oh yeah,
in pretty much every realm.
Well, I mean, James Bond, in real life, James Bond would have so many
STDs.
STDs. I mean, he would be just a bag of skin and bones. You know, and we see that. And for men, they're just like, well, okay, I'll try to be him. I'll try to be him. You know, I'll try to look like this guy. I'll try to act like this guy. So what they're doing is they're taking on caricatures of men from movies, from TV shows, from music. And men have always done that in some form or fashion. You know, back in the late 60s, there was a movie called Easy Rider. And it was all about riding your motorcycle out, being kind of the lone wolf. And I knew a lot of guys who that's really what they were trying to be.
Yeah.
They were trying to be this character from a movie they saw. And so a lot of men are doing that because they don't have anywhere else to look to.
Yeah. And I think that really points back to the mentorship element because a mentor is not just important for the things he teaches and says, but for the example that he sets. A lot of times we as guys, like, don't just tell me, show me. Don't just explain it to me, model it for me. And we need that. And so if the only model we have is a singer or a rapper or a person in a movie, we're going to start modeling these, as you call them very aptly, caricatures. Now let's kind of wrap up this idea with why is confusion itself? We've talked about the factors that led to it, but why is confusion in and of itself so dangerous? Why is it so much of a barrier for us guys? Why is it something that we need to look at and deal with?
Well, I think for a lot of guys, confusion acts kind of like a ceiling where it's going to keep you from really growing, from moving ahead. Because if you're confused, one, you won't pick a direction. And when you're confused, a lot of times you'll get lost. You'll go in the wrong direction. You know, if you're looking at your map, and I think all of us have had this happen, where your phone tells you this is where the location is, you follow the map, and the map was wrong. And you're like, wait, Google's wrong?
Why am I in a random field? This isn't Chick-fil-A.
Well, I don't know what to do. So I think a lot of men, it's that way for their life. They're confused, and that confusion is keeping them from discovering who they really are. You know, what gifts and abilities they have as men, because they're trying to own other gifts that they don't have. Every man is an individual. And so when they're confused, they're not trying to find who they are. They're just going to copy paste what other guys do.
That's a good point.
And so what we want to do is take the confusion away. So we can break that ceiling so a man can really begin to grow and know, okay, this is who I am. I'm not going to be, you know, Chuck Norris where I do push-ups and move the world. You know, I'm not going to be, you know, whoever, name your Thor or anybody. I'm just going to be me. And it's understanding that that's okay because that's what you were designed to be. And when a man is confused, he can't find his own design. And so he'll take on other people's. And a lot of times he'll try to live a life that's really not his.
To bring it back to the sports analogy, if you don't know the rules, you can't win the game. If you don't know the rules, you don't even know how to play the game. Some people are trying to play badminton on the football field. Or, you know, you're trying to play tennis in the basketball court. And so, you know, you're going to be just real confused. Like, hey, why are you bouncing the ball up and down and throwing it? Like, you're supposed to hit it with this racket, you know, like you're just not even in the same headspace as to what's going to make you successful. And it's the same thing on a life level. If you've bought into the idea, I'm supposed to be Bruce Wayne. I need to be a billionaire who's always got some arm candy and just beats up bad guys at night. And yet God's given you the gifts to be a really good computer programmer, you know, who is great at, I don't know, like hiking, you know, you love hiking. You know, you're going to be trying to be Bruce Wayne over here. And you're going to be like, man, I must just be terrible. I just must be a terrible person. When really you're just playing the wrong game. Confusion's a barrier. And yet it doesn't have to be there. That's what's cool is like, it's not, I'm confused, therefore I will stay confused. it can change.
Yeah, you can open it up, because what happens is a lot of guys in their confusion, like you said, they're on the football field, but they're trying to play a different sport, and they're going to get run over. They're going to get hurt. And so a lot of guys are carrying this hurt. And what they do is they just kind of shove it to the side, and they think something must be wrong with me.
Yeah.
And they just keep going in that mask. And so a lot of guys they're getting hurt, they're causing hurt, and it's really from their confusion, because they don't really know who and what they are.
Yeah. So we've discussed the issue of confusion. We've discussed why it's a problem.
Yeah.
Let's get a little bit into giving our audience some practicals for overcoming confusion. What would you say is one thing like a guy can do this week to make him less confused, to get him to a place where he is beginning to, instead of running away from the confusion, facing it head on?
Yeah, I think the main thing every man can do is try to get to the source of the confusion. Try to really dig in and say, okay, why am I confused? What's going on with me? And there's questions that I think are the best. It's just to ask yourself questions and be honest when you ask them, because sometimes guys avoid stuff like this. They think, oh, that's too touchy-feely. And it's not meant to be touchy-feely. It's just, when you go into a situation where there's a problem, okay, what's the problem? We're good at fixing problems. We want to know what the problem is. Well, that's what you're doing with this. You want to have a couple questions that you can ask yourself to say, okay, what's the problem? Where is it hurting? What's it from? And we got a couple of them. One of them is, what is my frame of reference from the past? And I think that's a good question for every man to ask. What is my frame of reference? Did I have a dad? Was he a good dad? Was he a not so great dad? Was he an absent dad? What was my dad like? You may have had a super dad. You may have a dad who was super passive. You may have had an alcoholic dad. I don't know. But it does make a difference to you. And it does affect how you live today. You can say, well, it's no big deal. It actually is.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying you have to go and confront or do anything, but you just need to look at that reality.
Yeah. We didn't write this one down, but you saying that made me think of this. It'd be good to ask yourself the question, who are my models of manhood?
Yeah, that's good.
Who are the models that I'm copying? Am I copying a guy from a movie?
Yeah.
Am I copying maybe a coach I had when I was in high school?
Yeah.
Am I copying a professor I had in college that was really good? Am I copying my boss? We all are copying somebody.
Yeah.
We're all learning and modeling ourselves after people that we see as successful. Asking yourself who that would be would really get you another step closer to understanding, like, ooh, I've got that guy as a model and he probably shouldn't be.
Yeah. That's a good point.
Or I have this person as a model. Maybe I should intentionally pursue that mentorship because they were really great to me, Well,
and I think that leads to another one from that is, who could be my model?
Ooh.
To where.
That's a good one.
Because a lot of guys who are great models have done things like written books. They've got podcasts. They've got things they can do to where they're taking their wisdom and they put it in a bite-sized form for you.
Yeah.
And I think if you pursue that model, that will help you so much quicker than if you just kind of sit around and say, well, I need to find someone sometime. We'll go look around. A lot of the guys who are good models for whatever you need, a lot of them have written books. They've got their own shows. They've done different things you can go and learn from.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think the final question we would encourage you to ask is, what are some of the assumptions I have accepted from the toxic messages of society? You also need to be aware of the culture you're in. I mean, we're a fish in water. What is the water? What's it look like? What are the things that my society has said about guys that because I bought into those assumptions, I'm actually hurting myself in the long run. I found for myself something that an assumption that I would have bought into is a man's supposed to never look stupid. You're supposed to be together. Yeah. And so we talked about this yesterday. I would not try new things if I didn't feel confident enough because I didn't want to look dumb.
Yeah.
But now I'm learning life is too real to take too seriously.
Yeah.
And that freed me.
Mm-hmm.
So I had this assumption that I didn't even realize I had. But once God brought it up, because it was actually during a prayer time that I had that time, once that was brought up to my attention, I could take steps towards intentionally not assuming that any longer.
Yeah.
So when we ask questions like this, we really help take the confusion out and get to the point to where we can start handling these things. To give it the illustration, you have to diagnose the problem before you can treat the problem.
Yeah, because it's like if something's wrong with your dryer and you just start taking it all apart without knowing what's wrong. Now, sometimes you may have to take parts of it apart. That's like asking questions. Let me look in this area. Let me look in this area. Then you figure out what's really wrong. Then you can fix the problem. But if you don't really know what's wrong, it just stopped working.
Yeah.
Okay, well, why? If you don't know, you may be fixing everything, but it's not the one thing that needs to be fixed. And I think that's where men are. We don't know some of this stuff, so we don't even know where to start fixing.
And you start with questions.
Yeah.
That's really what it is. Starting with hard questions.
Yeah.
But you don't have to take it personally. I mean, at some point in a future episode, I'll have you explain what mirror time is.
Yeah.
But that's
we'll
really
talk
all
about
it
that.
is. It's just asking the questions so that confusion can become a thing of the past.
Yeah.
It's possible, and you can do it in your own life. And then we believe that. So we're going to include these questions, the 4 that we discussed, in the show notes, both on our YouTube channel and wherever you listen to our podcast if you're doing the audio format. I would encourage you, copy those, paste them, and kind of think about them throughout the week. In fact, Dad, you've mentioned a recommendation for them to take that and talk with a community.
Yeah, I would take the questions, and maybe you have guys you get together with regularly, coffee shop, at work, guys you eat lunch with, and talk about those questions together, because I think other men have the same thing happening.
Yeah.
They have a history, they have assumptions, and they may not even realize they're doing it. And it's a good dialogue to start, because it's just a way to start recognizing, okay, this is where I'm at. How can I be a better man?
And they might notice things that you assume that you won't notice on your own.
That's true.
Like so many times somebody will say something and I'm like, I do that too.
Yeah.
Huh. And those moments can only happen in community.
Yeah.
Community also adds the sustainability of it, really, doing it more long term. And so we would encourage you, if you don't have a community like that yet, start.
Yeah.
Start meeting with people, ideally in person, but even if it's a phone call and a commute to work, whatever that looks like for you, if you take these steps with people, you're going to have a much greater chance of this being a long-term success solution for you.
I agree.
So take these questions, share them with others. The reason that we do this podcast and we do everything that we do at thrivingman.com is to be able to help equip you to thrive. We want you to experience mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual success in your life. That's why we do what we do. And we look forward to seeing you in the next episode.
Thanks for listening to the Thriving Man Podcast. If you want to check out more resources from David and Reese, you can go to thrivingman.com. We'll see you in the next episode.